Here. Sweet. All right. Well, don't worry about it right now. I don't know why I grabbed that second bucket of water, but anyway. All right, John, you ready?
I'm already.
You're already. You'll edit. Okay. Alrighty, guys. So for plates, it's a lot different process than doing cylinders. Obviously, out instead of up. So I'm going to show you how we do that. So I got 3 balls of clay here. I use the first one for a smaller plate. So this is a good sized ball of clay for, you know, a smaller plate. So anytime you're doing plates, you're not going to want to use one of the little green bats. You're going to want to use one of these. So for that much clay, you can get away with a bat this size. But if you're going to use bigger than that, you want a bigger plate, you need a bigger bat. And if you really want to go crazy, we have these great big bats. So to use these, you have to actually take the catch basin off, and then you get to clean up a big mess. So we won't be doing that today. But yeah, I like to make big old platters that are like this sometimes. So problem with those, the bigger you go, the better a chance you have of it cracking while drying. So when I start making big ones like that, it's kind of a 50-50 shot whether it's going to crack or not.
Even if you use a really slow dry?
Yeah, it's even with, especially with a slow drying, I'm able to at least get it that way. If I don't dry it slow, it's more like a 25% success rate.
Whoa.
So, the size I'm showing you today with my clay, it usually comes out fine. My clay has special particles in it that actually make it work better to not crack while drying. So, getting started, everything's gonna be the same. You get a center, just like normal. Once you get centered, we're not gonna open like number 2. We're gonna actually take a lot of pressure with your strong hand over the top, pressing it out wider, like that. Now once I press it out wider, this section right here, for me, I'm throwing left-handed, so I'm between 1 and 3, so all you right-handed people will be, or between 12 and 3, right-handed people will be 12 and 9, up in this region, so you'll push back from here. I'm gonna push from here, so I start right in the middle, block my elbow, use the right straight down from my shoulder, and lean into it. I use this part right here, the big ball of my thumb, push into the middle, make a dent, and then I push up into that quarter that I was talking about, pushing away from me. You got to keep it wet, and that's why I'm following with the sponge, because you got a lot of water on the sponge. So see how it went wider there? So I'm going to slow it down a little bit now. Do the same thing again. I just use the weight of my body to lean into it. Once I've pulled it out a little bit, I can recenter the edge. Make sure it's good and even on the edge. When you're doing this, if you're able to get it nice and even and smooth across the top, but your edge is really wonky, you can take your needle tool and you can just cut right straight down and cut the unevenness stuff off, just like you would if you were trimming the rim on a vessel. So you can make it perfectly center and smooth. So now I've got it most of the way out. I'm going to come a little bit further. So I'm going to go like I'm opening, just go down into it a little bit and draw toward myself. And just slowly pull that clay to the outside. So you see how that made it go just a little bit bigger? So it's still pretty thick. And I want it to be that way because I'm going to save this piece. Well, I'm probably going to have to save a different one, but I am going to trim a foot onto this. So that is basically how we open for a plate. So now we will do like step 3. We'll go ahead and set the floor. So I'm going to do some compressions coming out from the center. And then coming back in. If you don't do this, you can count on your plate cracking. But we do this for 2 things. One is to set it even thickness all the way across, and the other is to set the compression so it doesn't crack. So you're just throwing a pancake. Real easy. So some people, that is a plate. That's what they want. You know, you got yourself your. Actually, I had a student last semester that made a couple of pizza stones. So.
Don, I saw a technique on YouTube where the guy started out with a slab.
Yeah.
Is-
Same thing. You're just gonna have to do a lot of compression if you start with a slab because it's not thrown.
Okay.
So the clay is definitely gonna have to be compressed. They make molds that are plate shaped.
Yeah.
And so you can actually take a slab, put it on those molds, and upside down throw a plate from that. So it's perfectly even all the way through that way.
Oh, okay.
Then you can actually go and throw a foot right on it. So let it just dry off the mold, and there you go. Okay, so here's the tricky part. So I don't know how much of a wall you're gonna want on your plate. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my wood knife with the sharp edge here. I'm gonna lay it as flat as I can to the back. And starting with the point, just kind of rotating in underneath that clay. So all I'm doing is separating that clay from the back. See how it just cuts it loose? So I cut that clay loose. Now I'm going to take my fingers like this, use them like a wick to run some water under it, because obviously there was no water between that clay and the bat. So you got to get water under there to work it. Now you turn both your hands around the back side of the clay like this, putting your pinkies under, touching your middle fingers like that. You don't want to push too far with your pinkies, but get them most of the way under. And then as you rotate your hands up and in, what that does, stands that clay straight up into a cylinder. So now we just have a really, really wide cylinder. So it's really thick here still. So what I can do now is just like our one-handed cylinder pulls. I use my thumb, push in, do a pull, bring that wall up a little bit taller, thinning it out some. And now I'll choke that in a little straighter. Try and keep the water from gathering in the middle of that. I'll do one more pull, just to make it go a little thinner. Okay, so some of the things that we normally do last, we're going to do now. One is the rim of my clay. I'm going to use my sponge and my fingers. I'm going to smooth and get that rim really good. And the other is where we trim the foot, clean the foot. I use my wood knife now. I'll clean that foot off. Because once I get this laid down into a plate, I'm not going to be able to reach underneath there anymore to do this. So I got to clean that foot now. All right, so it's ready for step 5, shaping. Now to shape it, my strong hand is going to be here. This is what, it's just a mold. It's like a solid mold that I'm going to use to shape this. If I want a plate that has a really angled up wall, I'll hold my hand up at an angle like this. If I want a fairly flat plate, I'll hold it more flat. If I want it to be high like a pie plate, to where it has a wall that comes up and then lays out like a pie plate, I have to hold my hand high. If I want a more dinner plate type, I hold it low.
Did you actually make a mold to do that?
Could you?
Yeah.
I've heard of people that have like a piece of foam or something that they've carved that profile into, so they can match the profile every time. Yeah, you certainly could. All right, so I'm going to make this a fairly low plate. So I'm going to hold my hand down low. I'm going to start on the inside here with my other hand, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold that hand right where it's at, and slowly coming up the wall, stretch that clay up till it lays down right on my hand. Just like that, you got a plate. You don't want to futz with it. Once you've laid it out there, you start messing with it now, you're going to cause it to collapse. So it's basically done. So clean a little. Now if you're going to trim a foot on it, like I'm going to do, anybody have a wire handy? I forgot to grab my wire. Sweet, thanks Rose. Yeah, I forgot my wire. So now if you get this to where that comes out and reaches horizontal, it's going to fall. So it's got to have a little bit of an angle up. It can be pretty flat, and I can maybe make this a little more angled out right here if I don't want that to be so abrupt. So you can fine tune it a little bit, but it's very, very little touch. And one of my favorite things to do, people love the flower look. So slow my wheel down a little bit here. And you can go like this to the side of that. Just create a flower in the middle. Kind of a silly little thing, but people love it. All right, where'd that wire go?
It's on the side of the
Oh, the chair, okay. All right, so now I always stop my wheel to trim or to wire off. Now to wire this off and cut that loose from the bat, if I'm gonna trim a foot on it, it's still gotta be wet. So if it's still somewhat wet, it's still gonna be stuck to the bat if I don't cut it free. So I'll take the wire, wrap it around my finger a little while, take it the right distance. That's a little too short. All right. Take your thumbs, put them on the wire like this, so you're pushing down on them like that, but you're keeping good tension on it. If you let the tension go, the wire will curl up. So as you pull through, the wire will go up and it will cut it thinner in the middle. So you've got to keep really good tension on it so that it cuts all the way to the bat. You put your thumbs down to the bat, hold that tension, and just slowly draw towards yourself. Pulling through it like that. And now it's cut loose from the bat, and I can let it dry for a couple days under plastic to where it's nice and leather hard, and I can flip it over and trim a foot. And I'll teach you guys in one of the future times how to trim a foot. So that's just a basic, normal, small plate. So that was about 2 pounds of clay. So if you want to do a small plate, that's about the right amount. So you can see I got a bigger bat here now. Need a little bit more bat for make a little more plate, right? So that's, oh, I don't know, about 4 pounds of clay, so I'll make a plate about this big. So again, just center up. So get her centered. Then we start pushing it down and out. Yeah, I'm using the weight of from up at my shoulders. So by locking my elbow, I'm able to just drive down with my shoulder. So I don't have to have a lot of arm strength to do it. I could use my body weight, which for some of us is easier, for some of you will be more of a challenge. Now, this is still really thick. I'm going to be pulling clay to the edge, but what's going to happen is I've got more plate, or more clay than I have bat. So what I have to do is I bring this clay to the outside. I end up starting to leave a thick lumpy spot like that. So see how it's really thick right there? I just leave that right there. That's fine. We're just kind of reserving that clay for later.
Did you take it all the way to the edge?
Yeah, I sometimes do. This one I'm not going to. I'm going to end up cutting it to about here. So just like you always do, if you want to have it thicker to do a foot, you're going to have to leave a little more clay down there. So you're going to have to leave more than that. You're going to have to leave about a ½ inch of clay. So this one's not going to have a foot. Well, it probably will, but it's going to be a different kind of foot that I will teach you later. All right, so we've got it pretty much there. So now, time to set the floor. Work the clay out. Work it back in. Out and in, back and forth, smoothing that clay out, evening it out. It's all nice and copacetic. All right. So now, like I say, we've got that lump of clay there to work with, which is great, because we're just going to pull that wall. Again, same thing, cutting under just like before. Wick some water under it, hands behind, and you're not pulling it in and up. You get your fingers there and you rotate it up. If you pull, you're going to tear it off right here. It'll tear off right along that line because it's put too much pressure on that. So you're just turning it up. You're just standing up that clay. Right like that. So once I've stood that up, now I've got all that clay there. So now I can do some pulls and stretch that clay out.
And there's like people all around us, and I'm like, it wasn't me. I didn't say that, but it's like she just doesn't care. But it's so easy.
You can always do a gather. Now when you get your clay way out to the edge like this, speed is your enemy. You got too much centrifugal force going on that clay when it gets closer to the edge, so you gotta slow it way down. Which makes this wheel sound terrible. It sounds really labored. It doesn't like to go that slow. Alright, there we go. So now I've set my rim. Now I set my rim. So I set my thickness the way I want it. Do the rim, do the foot. Don't forget to do these or you're going to have a whole bunch of trimming work to do when you're done. You don't want all that ugly stuff down there, right? Alright, so this one I'm going to do more of an angle. So I'll hold my hand more like this. Plenty of water on that. Okay. Not quite as low. Alright, so I'll bring this out just a little more. Looks pretty good. Now we'll just lay that rim down a little. Very delicately. That looks like something they'd hang on the wall at Olive Garden, right?
No, that is, you're making a pasta platter.
I know.
It's a traditional Italian dish. I mean, that's what they use.
I know. I like to do that design on the edge. And if you want more texture on the inside, you can actually just use the spoon end of this and just do a nice swirl. So that makes it a little deeper than your fingers do. And then just kind of make it a little more subtle with the sponge.
Now, could you take and make it flatter?
Yeah, this could go flatter if I wanted it to. But I wanted this.
Yeah, I'm just asking. Make it more
But
like
yeah,
a
it could go flatter. Typically, there's a lot of wall there, so you need a lot of angle to hold up that much wall. So if I wanted something bigger, I'd use a bigger bat and just take the whole floor out wider and less wall.
Okay.
So yeah, that's a good question. Easy peasy, huh guys? So once you figure it out and you get used to doing it, plates are way easier than anything else. It's the easiest thing there's to do because you're just throwing a pancake and then standing it up. So
Now, I would like fettuccine alfredo in there, please.
yeah. A little chicken fettuccine alfredo. So this one I'm not wiring off. I'm just gonna let it dry loose from the bat like this. And that's all there is to it.
And why would you not wire that off?
Because I'm not putting a foot on this one.
Oh,
It's too thin.
It's, yeah, I left it thinner because I wanted to get more bowl out of it, more plate bowl, whatever. So I do the same thing when I'm doing pie plates, but it's got a, you know, a more straight up side. So I just leave the side, the wall pretty much straight up, and I throw my rim just, you know, up at the top. Just lay it out up at the top. Angle out just a little bit, because pie plates typically have a little bit of an angle descending down in. But usually I make my pie plates deep dish, they're not like that. So. And then I make some that I bring it out and just stand it straight up in the wall and I leave it that way, and I do those for quiche plates. So depending on how big a plate you want to make, if you want like a dinner plate, you need about 3.5 to 4 pounds of clay. So that's a pretty big chunk of clay to have to center. If you're trying to do a plate like that, that was about a little over 2 pounds of clay for that size. And then you also have to take into account, are you going to put a foot on it or not? Which, like I say, we'll cover feet another class. Easy peasy, right guys?
Yeah. You can do this little